Hi, I'm Kaylee, and today we're talking about books that were influenced by the Inklings. In June, I will be hosting the June Journeys with Inklings Readathon, and one of the prompts on our epic hero's journey is to read a book that was either influenced by the Inklings or that influenced the Inklings. So today we're going to talk about that prompt, talk about some books that were influenced by the Inklings. I've already done another video talking about books that influenced the Inklings, classics that they read, contemporary authors of theirs that they read their books and were influenced by them or liked them or didn't like them. So be sure to go over and watch that video if you want to hear about books that influenced the Inklings. But today we're talking about books that were influenced by the Inklings. This can be as broad or as narrow a category as you want. You could try to do some research and find maybe interviews where an author has specifically said that they loved Narnia and that inspired them in some way in their own writing. Or you could just keep it as a broad category and look for books that have similar elements to other books that the Inklings have written. Or you could just pick out a book and look at the cover and be like, sure, that reminds me of Middle-earth. And that is good enough too. So first let's talk about some of the elements in the Inklings writing that we could look for those elements in other books. One of the main things that you could look for this prompt would be to read some Christian apologetics. C.S. Lewis, of course, was very well known for his Christian apologetic books and radio talks and essays and lectures. So that would be a good one for this prompt, is to pick up some sort of Christian nonfiction. And of course, all the Inklings are well known for their Christian themes in their fiction as well. So any book that has strong Christian themes would definitely work for this prompt. The Inklings draw on Old Norse and Celtic legends. So that's definitely an element to look for. And we see a lot of like the prophecy or the chosen one trope. There's a prophecy about the 4 Pevensey children coming to Narnia. And Frodo is kind of the chosen one because everyone agrees that like destiny has chosen him to be the one to take the ring. I just love me a good prophecy. Love me a chosen one trope. You could also look for allegory and fables. Now you have to be a little bit careful about this one because both Lewis and Tolkien are very picky about what counts as an allegory. I don't know if we need to be that picky in our prompts, but it is something to look for. Another element to look for would be talking animals, since there are talking animals both in Middle-earth and in Narnia. And basically anything with a dragon on the cover, okay? Pretty much all dragon lore ever has been influenced by Smaug in The Hobbit. I just can't read a dragon book without thinking about The Hobbit. Also, any fantasy with a soft magic system. In both Narnia and in Middle-earth, we don't really know how the magic works. It's just very mysterious and kind of undefined. I think that Lewis and Tolkien kind of thought that that was important, that it should be mysterious. Because if you understand how it works, then it's just science, right? But if you don't understand how the magic works, then it retains this enchanting, mysterious kind of aura. You can also look for any book where we travel to another world by magic, or if we travel to another world by spaceship. Basically, anytime that you're kind of discovering this wider world that the character was not aware of before. And of course, any fantasy world that has extensive legends and lore and history. Doesn't have to be quite as extensive as Middle-earth, maybe. But any sort of fantasy world where that history is just really, really fleshed out and we have a lot of information. Those are just a few of the elements that I can think of that I'm kind of looking for to find books that were somewhat influenced or that remind me of the Inklings. But leave us a comment and let us know, what are some other elements of the Inklings writing that you kind of think of like, oh yes, if I look for that in another book, you can kind of see how these elements have been borrowed from the Inklings or maybe expanded in some way from the Inklings. And now I actually have some books that I've kind of been thinking of that include one or more of these elements. So first I'm going to start with some Christian nonfiction. I have heard that Timothy Keller has been described as the C.S. Lewis of the 21st century. century. And I definitely recommend his book, Jesus the King. I read that one a few years ago and was completely blown away. I can definitely see why they call him the C.S. Lewis of the 21st century. The next one is by Tom Gilson. It's Too Good to Be False: How Jesus's incomparable character reveals his reality. So this one kind of analyzes the character, the personality of Jesus, the way that he interacted with people, and it poses the question, can we believe this eyewitness testimony in the Gospels about Jesus? If you were going to make up a story about a man who claimed to be the Son of God, wouldn't you make up a more believable story? Like, wouldn't you make him a little more down to earth or something? And we see this in fiction where every hero has a fatal flaw, and it kind of makes them more relatable and everything. But Jesus doesn't have a fatal flaw. He's perfect. Which means that if he were a book character, we would be really annoyed with him. He would be the Mary Sue, and we would just be like, oh, I just can't stand this character. But he's not a character. He's a real person. He's too good to be false. I feel like I'm not explaining it very well, but this book is just so phenomenal, and it's like, some of it feels like that is totally what C.S. Lewis would have said. The next one is 10 Dumb Things That Smart Christians Believe Are Urban Legends and Sunday School Myths Ruining Your Faith. This is by Larry Osborne. Again, this feels kind of like something that C.S. Lewis would probably have said. Like, are you really believing what the Bible actually says, or are you just believing a bunch of cute little sayings like God helps those who help themselves? You know, that's not in the Bible. It seems like a lot of people, we have these little Christian-y sayings, but the Bible doesn't actually say that. The next one is a fantasy duology, which directly takes some influence from The Hobbit. So this is An Unexpected Apprentice and a Forthcoming Wizard. And this is about a little hobbit named Tildy, except they're not called hobbits because that would be like copyright infringement or something. But it's basically this little hobbit village. But Tildy wants to learn magic. She wants to become a wizard. So she runs away and she becomes an apprentice to the most powerful wizard in the whole world. And of course she goes on a quest and has to save the whole world. The next one is Door to the Lost. This is about a whole ship full of children that are magically transported to a world without magic. But each of these children have magical abilities, and they're orphans, and they have no memory of where they've come from. And their adopted world where they have arrived doesn't trust magic. And they're trying to figure out, where did they come from? How did they magically arrive there? Then we have the last of the really great Whangdoodles by Julie Andrews Edwards. And yes, it is that Julie Andrews. This is another one about children who discover this magical portal into another land, and they go on a quest and have to save the other land and defeat the evil bad guy. And it's very Narnia, and I super love it that it has its own little world building, its own ways of doing magic. So it's still quite unique, but it uses that, magical portal to a magical land kind of trope. Then I have The Blue Sword by Robin McKinley. This one I can't quite put my finger on it. There are a lot of fantasy elements in there. There's this magical sword and a prophecy, but I think maybe what kind of makes me think of this in conjunction with the Inklings is it has like a very serious undertone, There's some humor in there and some fun as well. But it reminds me of Lord of the Rings in the way that it's kind of this high fantasy. There's serious stuff happening. Similarly, The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin is serious fantasy. This is about a wizard and a spell that he's doing goes wrong, and then he is haunted by this shadow that follows him wherever he goes. So he travels all over the kingdoms of Earthsea, trying to get away from his shadow and figure out a way to undo the evil that the shadow has unleashed. I just love the whole Earthsea series. It's just so phenomenal, so good. And I have two series that I recommend for talking animals. The Redwall series is wonderful. And this kind of reminds me of like the end of a Narnia book when everything is all cozy and they're having a feast. and everyone is celebrating that the bad guy has, been defeated. That's what it feels like in Redwall. We have everybody gathering together for a feast. You just get that kind of that coziness like you get in Narnia. And with the Mistmantle Chronicles, we have prophecies, we have a chosen one, we have knights and ladies and adventures, and of course, they're all talking animals. We also get a lot of Christian themes in the Mistmantle Chronicles as well. So that's one of the reasons that I love the Mistmantle Chronicles, is we get all of these Christian ideas that are kind of explored through this fantasy story with talking animals. I would be remiss if I did not mention A Wrinkle in Time, of course. A lot of Madeleine L'Engle's books have those Christian themes and tropes where children are taken to another world. So a lot of the things that you love from the Inklings books, you will also see in Madeleine L'Engle's books. A series that draws on Celtic legends is the Dark is Rising series. This starts with Oversea Under Stone, and we have these siblings who are trying to follow these ancient clues to try to find this ancient treasure, but there are these evil guys trying to stop them. So we get these Christian themes of this cosmic good versus evil, but you also have legends of King Arthur. We also have a few places with some prophecies and a chosen one, and it follows several different characters in different books. So it has kind of a larger scope, very reminiscent of following different characters in different books in the Narnia series. Another great series from a Christian author is the Door Within trilogy by Wayne Thomas Batson. This one just checks off so many boxes, okay? We get where you have a portal to a magical land. We have all the Christian themes, like so many good, so good Christian themes that are explored. We even have like the Jesus figure reimagined into another fantasy world. And there are knights and quests and adventures and prophecies and all the stuff. So good. Just so stinking good. Oh, I love it. The next one is The Maze in the Heart of the Castle by Dorothy Gilman. Now this one is an allegory for a young man who's going through grief after the death of his parents. So he goes on this magical quest, but all of the people and the places that he goes to represent different emotions. So just the way that in Pilgrim's Progress you have like the giant despair, in this book he also meets characters who represent concepts. It's really heartbreaking and really inspiring and just absolutely beautifully written. We also have Gregor the Overlander series by Suzanne Collins. Yes, some of you may not realize Suzanne Collins has written other things, not just the Hunger Games. So Gregor falls down into the sewers and he discovers this whole land of caves and tunnels underneath the city. And there's a whole race of people who live down there. And they have a prophecy about an overlander who will come and save their kingdom. So he's the chosen one of the prophecy. So even though he's not being magically transported to another world, he has fallen into this completely different world that works by totally different rules and has a different culture and a different language. And so it follows the same type of thing where he has to figure out how to navigate this whole new land. Then we have the Snow Spiders trilogy by Jenny Nimmo. This one relies heavily on like fairy tales and legends and Celtic lore and things like that. It's about a young man who receives some very strange birthday presents. And as he goes through his adventures, then he begins to realize that magic is real and that those birthday presents actually kind of line up with different things that are happening to him. Then we have Watership Down by Richard Adams. I think that this one qualifies for the extensive lore. I mean, there's just a lot of legends and history and lore for a colony of rabbits, okay? There's just so much depth to this world that he's created for this group of rabbits. They have their own language and their own religion and their own culture and their own rules of like what is socially acceptable. And the journey that they go on is really epic. I think it definitely qualifies as like a very epic high fantasy kind of world. I also want to include Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card on this list because I started thinking about it and I started seeing a lot of similar themes between Ender's Game and Lewis's Space Trilogy. It's all about this cosmic good versus evil, and you're meeting some alien race and trying to figure out who are they and what do they want and how do I communicate with them. It's also kind of about like identifying who is truly the enemy. Are humans the enemy or are these aliens the enemy? There's just a lot of philosophical exploration that goes on in both of these books. So Ender's Game definitely reminds me, really strongly actually, of this Lewis's Space Trilogy. Then I have a whole bunch of books about dragons, pretty much just any dragon. It reminds me of The Hobbit. So here's all the dragon books. We have the Dragon Keeper Chronicles by Donita K. Paul. This one also has a lot of Christian themes as well. So that's a really good series. I've actually just read the first book in the series so far, but I really, really loved it. And I'm planning to continue and read the rest of that series as well. Then we have Quest of the Dragon's Princess by Lee Watts. This is another one that has very, very heavy Christian themes. I really like it because it takes all those fairy tale tropes, you know, the princess and the knight and the quest and the dragon and the things, but then it creates something absolutely unique. And the direction of the story allows you to explore these Christian ideas. It's just really, really beautiful. Then we have the Handbook for Dragon Slayers. This one I really love because it takes real history and then kind of weaves this fantasy story around actual historical places. And it kind of turns those fairy tale tropes around because you think the dragons are evil, but then as they begin to learn more about dragons, then we discover, I mean, yes, dragons are sometimes evil, but there's more to the story. You know, the world just keeps expanding and expanding the more that they learn about dragons. And the last one on my list today is the Skyriders trilogy by Polly Holyoke. So this one isn't dragons, it's Pegasi, but we do have a prophecy with a chosen one. We have talking animals because the Pegasi can telepathically talk to their riders. And we do have the extensive lore and legends going back into the history of this world. So this one also checks off a lot of boxes that remind me very strongly of the Inklings. There are tons of other books that I could include in this video, but I'm trying to pick out just the ones that really, really stand out to me. Please leave a comment and let us know, what would you recommend for this prompt? What are some books that really just very strongly remind you of the Inklings in some way, or have some of these elements that you think somehow kind of mirror or just remind you of the Inklings? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.